Hi, you've just taken a quiz and maybe you didn't do so well. We're going to work on that so that you can get better. How we're going to do that is we are going to work on I can solve multi-step equations with a variable on both sides. And you're going to write these problems down on your piece of paper. You're going to try them on your own and then you're going to check how you did by watching the video. So right now I want you to get a piece of paper and hit pause, write these problems down, and we're going to go over them. Okay, there's two different methods or ways to solve this problem. You will get the same answer. Whichever one you don't understand, just pay attention to the other one. And here we go. So when I'm solving an equation, I want to make sure that I put all my variables on one side. My goal is to get down to one single x. And I'm going to put my constants on the other side. I'm going to start this by subtracting this 20. I have a positive 20 on the left side. And so to make this 0, positive 20, the opposite of positive 20 is the inverse, so it's a negative 20. That leaves me with my 13x and my 9x because I've not done anything to those parts of the equation. And then I take 32 and I subtract 20 and I get the number 12. So on this side, I do plus 12 because it's a positive 12. Now I've got to subtract this 9x from both sides of my equation. A positive 9x subtracted by a negative 9x gives me the number 0. So I'm left with a positive 12 is equal to 13 minus 9, and that's 4x. Now, like I said, my goal is to get down to one single x, and I do that by dividing by this coefficient. So I divide both sides by 4. 4 divided by 4, it gives me with 1x, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. Now, I like to do the box method. It is a way of sorting your variables and coefficients, and it just simplifies the process just a step. On my left side, I am going to put all my variables. So I will write down 13x, and I will write down 9x. My 13x stays on the left side in the left box. I don't have to change the sign. But because I'm trying to move this 9x to the left side of the equal sign, when I cross the equal sign, I have to change my positive 9 to a negative 9. Then I'm going to move my constants into the right box. My 32 stayed on the same side of the equal sign, so I leave it alone. But my 20, I move to the opposite side of the equal sign, so I make it a negative 20. And now I'm just going to add these two top boxes. I'm going to use my calculator to add these numbers. I have a 13 plus a negative 9, and that gives me 4. That means on this left side, I have 4x. On the right side, I add a negative 20 plus a 32, and I'm left with a number 12. Now, just like before, I need a single x, so I'm going to divide both of these sides by my coefficient, and I'm left with x is equal to 3. Let's try the next question. I'm going to start by moving all of my x's on one side. I'm going to subtract 6x from this side. I'm going to subtract 6x from this side, and I'm left with 2x minus 1 is equal to, these cross each other out, a negative 5. Now, the opposite of a positive 1 is a negative 1, or the opposite of negative 1 is a positive 1. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. And I've got 2x is equal to. Now, this is where we end up with making mistakes. I'm going to put negative 5 plus 1 gives me the number negative 4. And I must divide by this coefficient here. So I'm going to divide by 2, and I'm left with x is equal to negative, nope, can't use the minus sign. You have to use the negative 4 divided by 2, and the answer is negative 2. Let's use the box method. I'm going to create a box on the left for my variables and a box on the right for my constants. I have two variables, write my 8x and 6x. The 6x crosses over the equal sign, so it becomes a negative 6x. Then I look for my constants. I have a negative 1 and a negative 5. My negative 1 crossed over the equal sign, so it became a positive 1. Now I'm going to add these two top boxes. I have 8 plus a negative 6. That gives me 2. So I have 2x on this side. And 1 plus a negative 5 gives me negative 4 on this side. Like before, I'm going to divide by this coefficient. So I'm going to divide by 2 and divide by 2. These cancel out. I've got x is equal to negative 4 divided by 2. And that answer is negative 2. Let's go to problem 3. I'm going to split my variables. And I'm going to move my constants together. Now, anytime we are moving constants or variables, we pay attention to the sign in front of it. That subtraction sign says I'm adding a negative number. So it's important to pay attention to that. I'm first going to add 5 on this side. It's a negative 5. I'm going to add 5 on both sides. I bring my negative 3m and my 3m. And 1 plus 5 gives me a positive 6. Now, I'm going to subtract. This is still equal. I'm going to subtract this 3m over here, and here's where you need to use your calculator. I have a negative 3 plus negative 3, and that gives me negative 6m. So I'm going to divide by this negative 6. Divide by 6 by negative 6. So 6 divided by negative 6 gives me m is equal to negative 1. Let's look at the box method. I'm going to sort out my variables and my consonants. Move all my blue variables on this side. Now this crossed my equal sign, so it becomes a negative 3m. Move all my constants. I have a positive 1 and a negative 5. Cross that line, so I change the sign. Now I have a negative 3 plus a negative 3, and that gives me negative 6. Negative 6m on that side. On the right, I have a positive 5 and a positive 1, which gives me a positive 6. I'm going to divide both sides by my negative 6. Don't forget that negative. Negative 6 and negative 6 equals 1. So m is equal to 6 divided by negative 6. And got a negative 1. Okay. We've got one last problem to double check. Now, don't get scared of the decimals. That's why we have a calculator. We're going to do the same thing that we've been doing. I'm going to look at everything that's got a variable. I'm going to look at everything that's got a constant. Okay. I'm going to start by moving my constant. My 9.2, the opposite of a positive 9.2 is a negative 9.2. And I have to make sure that I subtract it from both sides. So those cancel out. I'm left with 0.8y is equal to 0.4y. And here's where I use my calculator. 10 minus 9.2 gives me 0.8. So plus 8/10. Now I'm going to move my positive 0.4y. I'm going to subtract 0.4y from both sides. And I'm left with 0.8 on the right side. And 0.8 minus 0.4 gives me 0.4y. I divide by this number in front. So I divide both sides by 0.4. 0.8 divided by 0.4 gives me 2. So y is equal to 2. Box method. I sort all my constant variables on the left, all my constants on the right. I have 2 blue and 2 green. I have 0.8y, and I'm crossing the line, so I change 0.4y to a negative. My green, I have a positive 10 here and 9.2 here, but because I crossed that equal sign, I change it to a negative. Now I'm going to add everything on the tops of my boxes to get the combined underneath. 0.8 plus a negative 0.4 gives me 0.4. Can't forget that variable. And that is equal to negative 9.2 plus 10. And when I combine those, I end up with 0.8. I'm trying to get my y alone, so I'm going to divide by 0.4, divide by 0.4, and I'm left with 0.8 divided by 0.4. It gives me y is equal to 2. So now that we have practiced that, I want you to think about how you did, what mistakes you might have made, how you could fix it. We're going to try this quiz again, okay? You're going to do your best.